June 16th, 2020 electronic Zoom work session of the Lynchburg City School Board is called to order. There are statements that I need to read for the LCS board before we can hold this work session. That in accordance with policy BDD, the Lynchburg City School Board may meet by electronic communication means without a quorum physically assembled at one location when the governor has declared a state of emergency. That City Council adopted on March 24th, 2020, a continuity of government ordinance that allows City Council and the city's authorities, boards, commissions to hold electronic meetings in appropriate situations, so long as alternative arrangements are made for public access to such meetings. That Virginia's executive, legislative, and judicial bodies at all levels have declared states of emergency based on the advice of health directors and taken unprecedented restrictive actions to limit physical contact among citizens. That the coronavirus makes it impractical and unsafe, even life-threatening for a quorum of that public body to physically assemble in one location. That the purpose of the work session is to discuss or transact that business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations. Those alternative arrangements have been made for public access to the electronic meetings by streaming live on YouTube and broadcasting on channel 17 at 5 p.m. Meetings are rebroadcast daily at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. and available online for the LCS YouTube channel. Please mute your speaker unless you're speaking. If you want to ask a question or make a statement, send me a message to the chat option or raise your hand. I will now call on each board member attending this work session to reply with here or present. Mrs. Evans?
Sorry, I'm here.
Dr. Brennan?
Present.
Ms. Carter?
Present.
Dr. Coleman?
Present.
Mrs. Morrison's present. Dr. Nillis?
Present.
Dr. Sinai? Dr. Sinai?
Sorry, present.
Mr. Harvey?
Present.
Dr. Gupta?
Unmute. I'm present.
Thank you. Also joining us tonight, Dr. Crystal Edwards, Superintendent, Mrs. Christy Messervy, Board Clerk. Dr. Edwards, would you please identify other staff members joining us this meeting tonight?
Certainly, we have Hope Town City Attorney, Kim Lakonich, CFO, Dr. Tommy Coleman, Curriculum and Instruction Director, Mrs. Laura Sellers, HR Director, Ethel Reeves, our Family Community Engagement, Equity, and Opportunity Director, Amy Pugh, IT Director, Janine Daniels-Bosher, our Special Ed Director, and Austin Journey, who is filming and recording to ensure that we are live streaming. I think I have everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us tonight. The first order of business is the approval of the agenda for the school board work session. I recommend that the school board approve the agenda for the June 16th, 2020 work session. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Dr. Coleman, is there a second?
Second.
Is that Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? We will vote by roll call vote. Ms. Evans?
Yes.
Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Morrison, yes. Dr. Nillis?
Yes.
Dr. Sinai?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
Thank you. That takes us to item C1, the final budget approval for fiscal year 2021 school operating budget, which reflects the changes in revenue approved by the City Council. Dr. Edwards?
Certainly. So at the last City Council meeting, you remember that the City Council approved us for an operating budget, which is $2.2 million less than our very original pre-COVID budget from February, March. So what we have done is balance that budget in terms of matching our needs with the revenue that's received. The board, you have a copy of the actual revenue and the expenditures, along with a little bit more detail, because at our last board meeting, we talked about ways to balance the budget, and if indeed the city was going to go ahead with the $2.2 million cut, what that would mean for us. So let me give you a quick overview, and then there were some questions which I'm going to ask Ms. Lakonich to go through, and then we'll take any additional questions that you might have. So from an overview, just to go back in pre-COVID time, when we first received the governor's adjustments, we pretty much removed almost everything that was in our FY21 budget proposal. Save a few items we were trying to hold on to, like the Gov School seats, the non-Medicaid dependent slots at Family Insight, tuition, reimbursement, or some of the few things that we were hoping to still include in our budget, along with the 2% raise was gone with the governor, but a stepwise increment. Since then, we've experienced other cuts in the FY21 budget. So the step increment has been frozen until October, when we go back in the fall and review that with both school board and city council. And we had to make some additional adjustments. One of the things that I felt very strongly about is trying to make adjustments without having layoffs, rifts, and people losing their jobs. So we did do a hiring freeze. Some things we took a stop, pause, evaluated. Do we need this position? Do we need it right now? Or do we need to wait until we get a better handle on how many kids are going to be in our buildings and what our schedule is like? So for some things, we recognize we needed it right now. Other things are still on hold, even though they're in the budget. But the way that we were able to make some significant gains was by looking at positions where people may have resigned, retired, or through attrition, and holding on to those or reassigning staff into those positions. So we made some trades. We did some downsizing in that. And we had provided to the board an overview of about 17.55 FTEs that we have reduced out of the upcoming school budget to really help balance that FY21 budget. In addition, across the board, we have made such great strides in two very important things. One, putting in the pay schedules, and two, we reorganized central office to put more of our funding directly into the schools. While COVID and the additional cuts we experienced have kind of taken us back a little bit from that. We're still hopeful once we come out of this that we'll revisit those things. But right now, those things are on a hold. So we made some reductions across major categories, trying to do as little harm as we can, and look at things in addition to the 17.55 positions, FTEs, I should say, that we reduced. And some of those things are in purchase services, materials and supplies, internal transportation, field trips, things that we felt like might be reduced next year if we have less kids going out on field trips in large groups. We have less large group professional development, less people traveling out to go to large conferences and professional development. So we tried to look at all those areas to say, where can we make some reductions, and then spread that both across central office and throughout the schools. So we didn't have so much pain in any one area. In addition, we did those things that we were holding on to, the 2 additional slots at the Gov School, the tuition reimbursement, and the proposed non-Medicaid slots. We did have to put on our cut list for now until we get to a better position, maybe in the fall after we revisit salaries and a few other things. So we provided you with some detail on how we made the numbers work. And then there were some additional questions that were raised that we received by email. And rather than answering just one person at a time, I asked Ms. Lakonich to kind of go over those with you tonight. And then we'll see if you have any additional questions before we vote as the final budget on a long journey of budget conversations that we've had for the last couple months. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Ms. Lakonich.
Hey, good evening. The first question was regarding the purchase services, and I'm referring to your page 4 and 5 of your handout, which is the expenditures section. And the question was regarding what impact for purchase services for operation, maintenance, administration, and transportation. And of the three, you'll see that maintenance is taking the largest hit in this area. And does it have ramifications down the road? Absolutely. We have spoken to the director out there. This is, of all the cuts, this is probably the one that is most challenging for him, because there are some things that are just going to happen. There are maintenance agreements that we have in place that are going to continue, and there's no flexibility in that. So he knows he has to put those aside. What it means is what's left. That'll be what he gets to prioritize any extras. And I mean extras, it's, you know, upgrading the systems or the equipment. So, you know, I would not be correct to say that this could not result in deferring some maintenance to our buildings and our equipment. We do have, you know, the fund balance return that the city has noted that their intention was to give some of that back. So we have some, and when we address any of those, that's always a possibility to restore some of that funding down the road. So in speaking with maintenance, sorry, that is probably the biggest area. That was the area that was the most concerning. With the materials and supplies for them, that pretty much is gonna hurt their ability to, if a school comes and says they need furniture, they need bookshelves, they need cubbies, those little extra things that they go to the maintenance department for, they aren't going to have the budget for that. From the administrative side, some of the cuts you see are actually because we pushed some of the stuff out to the school level already. So it's not really a cut in our area, but there is, I mean, everyone did get the same. It was a percentage across the board until we could get the numbers to work. So there was a cut. Again, with the admin, we have the district level PD. And so, you know, so we may not be having the speakers. And so we're going to have to just really monitor. We have some fixed costs as well, things that we can't avoid. We, you know, from the finance standpoint, we're going to have our audit fees. I know HR is going to have their fees for background checks and things like that. So those are things every department's going to have to monitor and put it aside. It was some tough decisions, but when you have that kind of cut coming, that's where it's going to hit. Transportation, theirs didn't look as severe as the other ones in the purchase services or the materials and supply area. Their purchase services is outside repairs and like towing. Their materials and supplies are their parts, their oil, their fuel. And we've been working with them. We've given them the heads up that, you know, there are cuts coming. Everyone knows they're coming, and they're trying to do as much as they can now, and not to take advantage, but to sort of take advantage of the schools being closed and the buses not running, to get that maintenance done and get everything in order. So we're working with them on that. Question 3. So question 1 was about purchase services. Question 2 is about materials and supplies. Question 3 was about the instruction reduction, and when they refer to personnel services. And so you'll see the $805,754,000 reduction. And that's comprised of, you know, truing up the actuals, because we had people that retired from last year. And so this is, you know, more current snapshot. Plus we do have those positions that we had provided that we did cut from the budget, and some of those were in the instructional field, so those came down. The other thing is that we usually keep several contingency positions in our budget. It's to prepare for things that we can't control. You know, if you have some class size, if some class exceeds the class size ratio, or even more is if it's IEP driven and we have no control over it and we have to provide a one-on-one. So we had contingency positions in there. And this budget does reduce those amount of contingencies down to 3. So that is part of that reduction. The other question under the instruction section was the tuition payments. You'll see the $857,000 reduction. That was where Laurel's non-center-based program was dissolved for next year. So we had the expenditures go away as well as the revenue go away. So that was that reduction. And the fourth question was about reducing the FTE for bus drivers. And the question, if I understood it was correctly, was that because of the change from the 6-hour drivers to the 8-hour driver? And to be honest, it wasn't. It wasn't our preference to get rid of those positions in light of not knowing what the school's going to look like next year. But those were the positions that were open. And to be honest, those are the positions that have been open and we haven't been able to fill. It will help to have those 28-hour positions. But the reduction that we noted in the additional $1.4 million decrease, we did not decrease the bus drivers because of that conversion to the 8 hours. It was just, that was solely off of the additional cut from the city, plus with the fact that we had adjusted down the bus rentals and the facility rentals. We had to offset expenditures for that revenue loss. Okay. I'm hoping I understood all the questions. If you need any, if I misunderstood, just let me know. Or if you have any other questions, I will try to answer.
Dr. had some questions, and then Dr. Nillis had a follow-up.
Okay.
Ms. Lakanich, I would like to go back to the same slide you just talked about in terms of expenses. In terms of personnel services for administration, you're showing an increase of 18,000 and employee benefit of 198. With salaries frozen, no new hirings, where is that increase coming from?
Well, some of the employee benefits it's in administration, but it's not tied to personnel. So our personnel department, they hold the budget for our terminal, the vacation payout, the sick leave payout. They also have the budget for our unemployment. And one of the things that was increased in this budget was our unemployment because we are experiencing higher unemployment payments. So that's part of why you're seeing the benefits go up. When you see that the administration cost itself and personnel went up, some of that was that we are getting people correct in the right areas, that they may have been coded in the wrong major category and that they needed to be in the administration. So we have made some changes that, but it's not a change in actually hiring new people. It's just getting them coded as we continue to clean up some of the things in our chart of accounts.
Because I look at the optics of it, on the instruction side, we're losing 805,000, but on the administration side, we're adding 18,000. It's a small amount. But the other question I had is in pupil transportation, a loss of, taking out 1.2 million. And I know how important kids' transportation and safety is. So I just want your assurance, there will not be compromise on safety of these kids in those cuts you're proposing.
And I've actually spoke to the transportation director as early as today, and he has assured me, because the one thing I was concerned about is we are reducing the number of buses that we're purchasing it went from 8 last year, well, this year to 5 next year. And he said he is not concerned about that at all. We are still on target with our cycle. And we have to keep that level because of the state funding that has that restriction in it of what we spend on capital. Do we have concerns? I mean, I have concerns just because of the fact that I don't know what transportation. We did this. We made these changes based off of what the school was before COVID, not knowing what the bus schedules are going to look like and everything. That is something that we definitely are going to have to keep monitoring to see what it's going to look like, and a change accordingly. We will have more 8-hour contracted employees that we can use in the however we need. We just need to make sure it's enough. And even with this, we still have several 6-hour bus driver vacancies. We did not eliminate all of them. And just until we know what the schedule is going to look like and what, you know, the number of days and the number of routes and all for next year, we don't know if it's going to be enough.
I have 2 more questions. I don't, Madam Chair, can I continue or should I come back?
You can continue. I'm keeping a list of people that have questions. So go
So-
ahead.
On IT purchase services, you're proposing a $660,000 increase. Knowing that we had a $2 million coronavirus money and most of it was going for IT infrastructure, where is that additional expense coming from?
These are actually the softwares associated, and it's throughout the whole school division. It's at all the schools. In last year's budget, they were being charged at the school level. We have opted in this year to move all the technology software that all the schools use into one area, and they maintain it to make sure it's being utilized, that, you know, just to keep everything in one simple location. When we have turnover and, you know, administration out at the school level and new people come on, it's just nice to have everything in one area. So you will see that is showing where all the technology went to the.
Last year, we gave them 2 million extra between operations, maintenance, and IT from whatever we shaved off from health insurance. So was that money expended or was it taken back or not used for software at that time?
That wasn't included in the IT budget last year. It was at the school level. It was actually in the school-based instructional budget, and it was covered in the instructional budget. And as far as the department, those 3 departments could have used all the extra money that was given to them. The spending freeze that went into place, they were impacted as well. And as we keep monitoring to see how the revenues are coming in, we have started, because it did not make good fiscal responsibility to have staff available, ready to work, and not be able to give them the funds to clean the buildings, to strip the floors, to do the maintenance on the buses. So we have been trying to get them in a better place for next year, knowing that they do have a cut to their budget. So we have worked with them, and they're making those purchases as they can. But we had to wait to see how sales tax and the lottery funds to make sure that the money was going to be there.
My last question is about the $600,000. We had the special education account till June 30th. Where do we stand on that? How much have you been able to spend and how much is still left over?
It's a matter of waiting. You're speaking of the maintenance of effort? Is that what you're referring to?
$600,000 you found additional money in SPED account.
They have made they've made some purchases. That is not going, it was not $600,000, but we have other things that we are doing that's taking from within our existing budget. And then we have, there is an exception where we can file, but it is going to be, that's a several month process to see when we're going to stay with that. But we have done as much purchasing. It is hard to do that, especially when COVID has shut down a lot of the factories and they couldn't get the product and it had to come to us in time. So we are.
What's the exception? I couldn't get it.
There is exceptions. So if there's been a change in a student, and it's things that at this point finance themselves would not know. If there's a change in a student, they no longer need a certain expensive service, you can say, okay, that's an exception. If you had one staff there last year and then this staff replaced this person and there was a salary lapse, we get to, it's literally pulling person by person, and we are dedicated to doing that. I have someone that's working on it regularly. It's going to be comparing all of last year's people to this year's people, and then working with SPED in order to determine that change plus any other changes as far as things that's student specific that we wouldn't know about.
So how much is the unspent money in that account?
Wait, Dr. Gupta?
Last line, I'm done then.
Okay. Okay.
Well, it's, I really don't have, I don't want to give you an answer and be wrong. I mean, they have spent several hundred thousand. However, we also have with the health insurance that we're going to be expensing, that's going to give over $100,000 more to it as well. So we are recognizing some expenditures that had not been coded as SPED expenditures, but they were SPED expenditures. So we're correcting those, and those aren't really, that's just correcting the way they're coding. It's not really taking away from fund balance. So we're trying to do that as well. But it's not something I'm going to have an answer for today. It is literally going to be, with everything involved, it's going to be several months of work. And we don't have to, it doesn't get filed until January. I mean, we're working on it now, but we'll continue to look to minimize any issues that we have with it.
Thank you.
And we
Dr.
need to
Edwards?
minimize, I'm sorry, we need to
Dr.
minimize it because we need to to get it driven back down. Otherwise, we're going to have to keep meeting that number. And we don't want to, we want to do for our students, but we don't want to make ourselves do if we don't have to.
Dr. Edwards, Amy Pugh said that she would like to have a comment.
Absolutely. She wanted to clarify something on the tech side.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to respond to Dr. Gupta's question about the increase in the IT expenditures for purchase services. And Ms. Lukanich mentioned that it was an increase from school-based software, which is absolutely correct, but it also is that we're funneling also department software and renewals. So, you know, our finance software, all of the special education software, all of the maintenance and transportation and student services software, which was previously in their budgets, has now been moved over to the IT department so that we can manage that and make sure that all of those contracts are on a July 1 to June 30th year, as well as making sure that we know that they've been paid and we can manage those contracts. So that is the increase. It's not really an increase in spending. It's just a transfer of that money from departments over to IT, if that helps clarify.
Thank
And that
you.
includes board docs as well, too. We took it out of my account or you guys' account and moved it over to Amy's.
Right. So that would be any software in the division that was currently being purchased is now funneling through the information technology department so that we can manage that.
Dr. Nillis had a follow-up question.
Well, actually, I kind of had two. The one I think's already been answered regarding the buses, because I know we've been procuring 8 buses a year, which is putting us on about a 15-year replacement cycle for buses. So that was a concern. I guess the other is more of a comment on the deferred maintenance. We've not been able to invest in maintenance and keeping things up to date at the level we should. Some of that's driven by city funding because it's capital investments, and you're looking at power systems and HVAC and heating and cooling, electrical. That's the kind of thing that can really, you defer for a couple of years and all of a sudden you're really in trouble. Not much we can do about it right now. Just like I say, it's really just a comment, and it's a continuing issue for us. Thanks.
And it is something that we do have on our radar, and that's why we have spoke to the director, and we've tried to minimize the impact and let him do as much as he can this year. We're also still, our sales tax revenue really has not fallen as much as they had projected before, which every time that happens, our fund balance is going up. And with, in the past, the fund balance has gone to capital improvement, to the CIP. And then if they're going to let us have some of it back, because that was the intent, the board would have that, would be able to make those decisions to fund that area again, because it's not that we don't think it's a priority. We just had to cut so much. We didn't know where else to take it from, because that's where a large portion of that, any cut, when you do a percentage, because they have a large amount of budget, it hit them harder.
Dr. Edwards, did Dr. Sinha join our meeting again?
I believe she's here. I can see her.
Okay. Dr. Brennan had the next question.
Ms. Lukanich, thanks so much for all your work on this budget. This has clearly been a marathon and not a sprint this year, for all their time and effort. So thanks so much. I have two, I think, simple questions that have probably to do with more my ignorance about accounting rather than any other issues, but they're just two. One is on page 6, when we talk about purchase services, total purchase services, the difference from 2019, 2020 to 2020, 2021 is $495,520. But we've talked about by our breakdown earlier of where the cost savings were, that we cut about $299,000 in purchase services. So does that mean that our original budget was about $300,000 higher than this, or how do those two numbers?
The one thing we didn't say that when we did a reduction in purchase services, because we could not cut anything in IT, anything that was technology driven, purchase services was not reduced because the software is going to cost what the software is going to cost. You know, I keep saying school, but it is the department, you know, our financial software. So not everything was reduced in that area. Also, we did not, because of maintenance of Everett, we did not reduce anything that had coding for special education. So when you're seeing that, that is where the budget was before. It wasn't even in purchase services. So it's a transfer that is a little misleading. It's not that anything on your part. It's a valid question. It's just that it's where that technology went to.
Okay, right.
Dr. Brennan, we're comparing our happy budget, which I like to call it. The first one we put together, which had everything that we wanted with level funding and the whole 9 yards. That was our baseline for where we started kind of backing down, reducing it. So we didn't necessarily use 2019-20 as a baseline as much as we were using our first version of pre-COVID. This is what it would look like if we had our way budget that we had to go back and adjust.
And the way we built the budget this year is completely different than what it was in 1920. And you know, every location had a meeting and they told us where they needed the money. So it may not be tied to anything specific other than this is where they needed it. But when it comes to the purchase services, we did not have it. We did not have it in the purchase services in the prior year. So it is showing up as a big increase there.
Okay, and then my last question is on page 1, talking about revenue. The state sales tax for 1920 was 11,678,000, and we're predicting it's going to be 12,314 for this year. I thought we've had this big discussion about the sales tax going down this year. We're so concerned about that. I'm surprised that number is higher.
That is the number that is that the state has given out in their calc tool, and we are using that, and we have held on to the CARES funding, and a lot of school divisions are doing that. Some school divisions opted to not use the state number, and some cut it as much as 50%. And then other school divisions did the same thing. They used the calc tool because that's something that you can. We've always used the calc tool for that. So it's something that historically this is where that number came from, but then we have not used that CARES funding. That CARES funding is going to be the stopgap for any funding loss. Allowable on the school side. And then we still have the city's care money, which is more restricted, that we will be going to the city council next week. But that money, which is almost $2.5 million, would be what we would hold on to shore up to see what sales tax. And again, I hope it remains, all the forecasts have been that sales tax was going to see this dramatic decrease. And we received the June payment today, and it was not, it was down, but it wasn't anywhere near 50% or even at the 20%. So,
Great.
Which is good.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Harvey has some questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Laconich, members of our staff and administration, I really do thank you guys for all of your hard work this budget season, preparing all the different options and looking at the variables and putting it in a way that we can understand that. So I do want to first say thank you all for that. My question specifically is probably directed for Dr. Edwards, although Ms. Laconich might be able to tag in a little bit as well. I'm thinking ahead to this October decision that we're hopefully going to be able to make and go back and revisit, salary adjustments. So my question is, what key matrix are we going to be looking to that's gonna flag us and say, okay, yes, we can start seriously talking about this again? How are we able to track that? And is that something that we can be getting a monthly update on the status of that as we approach October and be able to start looking at that again? Because I think that's something that all the members on the board are probably pretty concerned with as we approach October. And then as a follow-up question to that, once we meet that milestone and we are, hopefully able to implement salary adjustments, is there a priority list of what are the items from the cost reduction chart that we're going to look at and set a priority for as to what might be taking place, such as capital improvements, repairs, and so forth?
So let me just do the big picture parts of that. And again, Kim, just jump in when needed. If you recall, when we were at City Council, it was more of a joint discussion about both city and schools in the fall, going back and revisiting all of their revenue. So the sales tax, which we're predicting would be lower, lottery funds, which was another unknown, but the sales tax in particular, along with other revenue sources for the city, was of concern for them. And they had originally said with their raises, they don't have step increases, but with their raises, that should the economy look a little better than what we're predicting, and a review of the revenue in October, remember the revenue is about 2 months behind, we can make a better decision about whether or not to put that money in for them into salaries and for us into our step increase. And I understood that to be a joint decision between both groups, looking at it at the same time, looking at very similar metrics, with state tax, sales tax being one of the common ones, and for us, lottery, and I'm sure the city has several other revenue sources that they're looking at. So that's the first thing that would start the conversation about, wow, we predicted whatever sales tax loss, it looks great, it looks good, it looks better, that would generate that conversation for us to start looking at, for us, our step increase. In terms of the priority, yes, we have a list where we start to look at things. And as you saw, some of the last things to come off the list with the non-Medicaid dependent slots, because we anticipate that kids are going to need some additional services. The extension of the GovSchool slots, looking at perks for our staff in addition to the salaries, looking at some form of tuition reimbursement. So we can work backwards through our list that we had when we first created our pre-COVID budget. But I'm hesitant to say that I would follow it exactly, because I would really like to wait and see what our children need. I could base it off of if school were going to return exactly like it did last year. Here are step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But we may get in a situation where when we do get back to return to learn and brick and mortar parts of it, we might have different needs with different priorities, or something that we wouldn't have ascribed a priority to may now be a priority. So I think we will be doing ongoing assessments to look at what our student needs are. And I'll just give you one example. We put in for additional behavioral coaches in our original budget. We may or may not need that depending upon what school looks like. If class size is smaller, if kids are on alternate days, it might be the social worker that now jumped to the high priority over a behavioral coach. But I feel much more comfortable making that decision with the kids in front of me and knowing what we're up against than making it right now, just kind of predicting, if that answers your question.
It does. And so it sounds like to me that we're saying that following the sales tax is really going to be what gives us the pulse on whether or not we're going to be able to look at the step increases. And so right now, I understand Ms. Lakonich said that the reports for the sales tax is that it hasn't looked as bad as we anticipated. Is that correct?
That is correct, and we hope that continues. And sales tax is a big driver because that's the one thing that's not guaranteed. The other thing that I hesitate is, our state funding, a lot of it is based on ADM. So, when we come back and when we start revisiting it in October, we're going to have, an idea of what our ADM is looking like. We will be able to recognize our staff turnover, the people that have retired, and if they're replacement, we will see some savings in that. That would be a proper use to put towards salary increases. Some are going to say that the fund balance return is one-time money, and you've got to be very cautious and giving increases off of that. And we do realize that because that's something that you're going to have to sustain. So I'd like to find it within salary lapses and the vacancies that we have in our budget are budgeted at a midpoint. And if they come in lower, you'll get savings on that, plus those turnovers. So we would look at the other issue is that the state themselves they're going to be redoing their budget. They're going to have another session and they're going to update their budget late spring, early fall. And at that point I think that would be the driver. I would like to see what their new numbers, and that's where they will roll out an updated sales tax projection, plus what their normal state funding is going to look like. So I think once you get all of that together, you're going to have a more complete picture. But yes, as every month goes along, we'll have an idea, is sales tax falling off? Because we can go back further, but we keep a 4-year history so we can look at it at all times.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Coleman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would like to join my colleagues in thanking Ms. Lakonich and all of the team, Dr. Edwards, for building a budget in which we can articulate to our stakeholders in an effective way. I'm listening particularly to Gary's question, was very good. I'm thinking about this. With March having come with all of the closing, and that was the end of the third quarter. Now, Kim, you're saying you've got information in closing out the fourth quarter, and now we're trying to approve the budget that has been built. I'm wondering the following. I know we had some cost savings around vehicle fuel and even substitute teaching types of dynamics reductions. But I'm wondering how much of that money had to go and is factored in to the cleaning supplies, the necessary additional monies that others are projecting around the state for custodial work, protocols that are rather stringent for all of that, health services, et cetera. I heard Dr. Edwards mention the mental health dynamics, and so I'm assuming that's been calculated. But does this budget adequately, I know the CARES Act, and I know all of, take into account for the increases that may well come from cleaning, custodial, stringent cleaning protocols, health services, et cetera?
We do have the two various CARES money, the one on the city side, that one is one-time expenditures that are COVID related. And in our proposal to the city, it does have the needs that the maintenance department had put in. We still, if our revenue comes in, we will have the CARES money on our side, and that you have longer to spend that. The one on the city, you have to spend within the 2020 calendar year. So we do have it.
So
Not
this
knowing what's ahead of us,
Yeah.
I can't ever say it's adequate. I don't want to be misleading, but we do have we do have those sources that we can fall back on.
And all of the protocols necessary to make people feel safe with the whole PPE, et cetera, all of those things will be accounted for within the context of this budget.
So
All right.
to answer your question, we put a lot of that as intended. That was what the CARES money on both sides were, part of what it was intended for, to increase your cleaning, PPE, making sure that you have everything that you need, as well as there's a lot of funding in the shore up of your technology and making sure that, you know, as best as possible, kids have access. So between the school CARES funding and the city CARES funding, those are the areas where you will see much of that, what you're talking about, Dr. C, in terms of those things. If, as Kim said, Ms. LaConnie said, our numbers start to look good, it starts to free up money. But I just want to caution everybody right now, our CARES funding, because we did experience the 2.2 cut in our operating budget, our CARES funding on the school side is being held just in case that what was it, $12 million worth of sales tax is not $12 million worth of sales tax. If it's lower than that, that's where our CARES money is going to go to shore up that hole. If it's around that or even better than that, then yes, it does free it up. So I want to make sure that we all have a realistic picture about the funding and what we're doing. But I also want to make sure that we're absolutely, I will not bring kids back if I can't keep people safe. You know, that is our number one priority. So from the city's CARES, you'll see we added additional misters so that we can miss the buses in between picking children up. I mean, all of the safety protocols that are in the CDC guidance and the guidance that we have, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the reopen schools piece, we are taking that very seriously and almost to a fault where I'm sure people are upset that we're not moving faster. And it's because we want to make sure when we put the kids on the bus and when we bring them into the classroom, that we have accounted for, not only do we have the supplies and the people, did we budget enough time? Because you can mess up on time if you don't have enough time to clean a bus or clean a room or flip a cafeteria if you're using that. So, I mean, we have teams of folks right now working on that just to make sure that, you know, Lynchburg City Schools does the right thing by our students, staff, and families.
Madam Chair, my last statements. Does the 2021 budget adequately handle homebound instructions for students who may have acute health issues?
So that one is in our plan. We're taking a look at what the safety issues are in terms of, you know, our regular homebound, we go to the home, you're with the child, but making sure that we keep our staff safe and not at risk, the 6 feet PPE and so on and so forth. But also if we could provide online options for kids who have access, or we can at least give them access, a device or something like that. So that is being looked at, Dr. C. When I talk later about how we divided the Return to Learn Dream Team, I'll tell you about special populations and variances and things that we can do to make sure that when we have, you know, a group of kids or a population, we don't want to miss them, and what we can do on our end on that.
Well, I close by simply stating it's good, all of the board members and every question. It is my hope this year that we have a budget that we can articulate the goals and objectives. I'm hoping that every dollar in this proposed budget is tied to student achievement and how we're going to help our kids achieve. And so to that end, with the goals and objectives that we have, you know, I'm certainly willing to give this a shot and see what happens.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions before we call for a vote?
I have one.
Dr. Gupta.
So I just want a clarification on those purchase services. I'm in support of IT, but you said it's the departmental expense moving into the central office. So it should be a wash then. It should not be an additional expense on your balance sheet.
That's what Dr. Brennan was referring to. They were not budgeted in a 3,000 area. I would have to go back to see, but they were not actually at the school level in a 3,000. They were paid this year out of an instructional, and we did charge them to a 3,000, but that's not where the budget was sitting. And with the DOE guidance, they need to be purchase services because it's online and not a 6,000 in materials and supplies. So we were making that correction.
Instead of the account numbers means the savings are happening someplace where you're not charging the accounts for these services. So are you moving money from those accounts to offset this additional expense you have in the new accounts? Maybe I can talk to you later. But
Okay.
Any additional questions? Right, this, the 2021 school budget final budget is up for approval tonight. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Is there a second?
I'd second the motion to approve the 2020-2021 budget.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Any further discussion? All right, let's do roll call vote. Ms. Evans?
Yes.
Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
With gratitude, thanks. Yes.
Ms. Morrison? Yes. Dr. Nellis?
Yes.
Dr. Sinai?
Likewise, with gratitude, yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Dr. Gupta?
yes.
Thank you. That moves us to B2, Title IV, Part A, Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grants. Dr. Edwards.
Yes, and I would like to invite Dr. Coleman to join me and talk a little bit about this. This is part 2 of the federal grants. You did a little bit last board meeting. Dr. Coleman?
Yes. This grant is for the Title IV Part A, and it's Student Support Academic Enrichment Grant. It's divided into 3 parts: well-rounded, safe and healthy students, and in technology. Included in that are some positions that are in the division. There's a piece of the elementary strings teacher. Some stipend money is there for when we have to have folks work outside of contract, working on curriculum development, pacing, those kind of things. There is some money for professional development, largely for blended learning model and doing some virtual learning and helping our staff be better prepared for the way we need to meet the needs of our kids. There's some money there also for some materials and supplies for things such as when we do science or kits and things that we've done in the past, and also for things that we may need to do moving forward that may need to be sent home. Safe and healthy students, that part of it is a division case manager, portion of that person, and portion of the division social worker. There are also some professional development that will be necessary for mental health awareness, some trauma-informed care, bully prevention, things that we do in student services for alternatives to suspension, those kind of things. A lot of the mental health work that we think we'll need to do can be included in that as well, would be appropriate use of funds. And training for our counselors and social workers should they need that. There's also technology funding included in this, professional development for that, for the PD blended learning strategies, PD for new learning management systems included in that, and also some instructional supplies that may be necessary for technology equipment for doing it. Funds between the different areas can also be blended if we want to work on something together, and we oftentimes do that. Between something that's potentially well-rounded and it's also technology, so we can do that with a book study or other things. This funding is for $302,000 $552.98. There is a private school set aside within this also for $70,102.10. They're included. We ask that you would approve this this evening so we could secure the grant for these funds. Go ahead and apply and secure the funding. I'm open for any questions.
Dr. Gupta had a question.
Dr. Coleman, I asked that question last time in our board meeting too. This Title IV is primarily for achievement gaps, right? Is one of the components of reducing the achievement gap. And my fear is coronavirus. We had the achievement gap between my white students and Black students prior to coronavirus, and this will escalate it further. That's my fear. I don't know how true my fear will turn out to be. And in this proposal, I don't see anything in terms of bringing that gap to a level which is zero. And one solution I see is we have HBCUs in town which can help these students to be role models, mentors, guides, and help truly reduce that achievement gap. So have we tried any non-traditional ways of working and using these monies instead of just, internally our staff and let's do the same thing?
Right. Well, those things with the training initiatives and things that are with that can certainly be used to address those. And the traditional staff members that are there, that are our case managers and our social workers, and the things that are within the student services department certainly address those issues. And those are some of the folks that would work with setting up things with mentors and other positions that are there, or other things that are available. The things that we do with the technology, of course, is also work that we would do to support staff in supporting students in using the blended learning model and being able to reach kids for that. Those are the things that we do with those funds.
Have we ever reached out to these HBCUs to help us out, or maybe brainstorm how could we use or develop role models within their system, aligning with our system to make sure our kids are successful and the achievement gaps are reduced through a structured mentoring program?
Really, the mentoring program really is not a portion of this, but that's something that those departments do and reach out for having the mentor program in place, and we do have folks that work with our kids. I think that's something for moving forward would be an appropriate thing to do.
Because I have not seen a PBK chapter in Lynchburg. There's one in Richmond.
Okay.
Those are the role models you see. They adopt you as a little brother, and so I don't know. I was wondering maybe we should do something non-traditional to see if it makes an impact or a dent on our achievement gap.
So Dr. Gupta, just to go back to actually the beginning of this year, one of the things that before the Equity Task Force shifted their focus a little bit to be on the volunteer policy, we did have one of our priorities was mentoring. And we talked about a mentoring group. And we were developing strategies and goals to go along with that. Now, I will say in some schools, there is mentoring going on, but not as formalized at the division level as I would like to see. Part of that is combining with our volunteer policy as well, because any mentors obviously would have to go through our volunteer screening process and be vetted by that. But I will say just historically that has been, when we did our top, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 priorities, but I definitely remember that being one of the priorities on the Equity Task Force when we broke up into subgroups, looking at the mentoring. And it has been something that Dr. Coleman has actually been talking about for quite some time in terms of just working with young people. So it is still on our radar, on our to-do list, and on our priority list. I would say that COVID right now has kind of thrown us for a loop for many things. We've limited volunteers to begin with, just because we want to minimize physical contact with kids, staff, to do some of that. But I wanted to just give you that little historical piece, because you asked, have we thought about that? And has that been something we've considered?
I have a follow-up question. I noticed when I reviewed this right before the meeting started that the Young Men and Women of Character Mentoring Program at Fort Hill Community Center, that was taken out of this. Is there a reason for that?
Right. From what I recall with that, some of the activities that were planned for dealing with the different things that they wanted to do were not allowable expenses within this grant. So we have those funds need to go elsewhere to support student services.
Thank
And I
you.
can add to that too. They pursued an Ed Foundation grant with Jody Gillette, and that grant enabled them to have more flexibility to do some of the field trip, to do some of the character building activity. That actually ended up being a better fit than the Title IV. There was just additional restrictions. We kept running into red tape, so we kind of prioritized them for Ed Foundation grant instead of Title IV. It was a better fit, but they're still actively providing that service.
Thank you. That makes sense.
And
Dr.
that's
Coleman?
Christy Compton. I'm sorry, Christy. I just realized that you were on a call, and I don't think I introduced you when we first started. So let me take a moment to just say, Christy Compton is our grants coordinator, and she is the person who makes sure that we follow all the grant rules, so that we can access the funding in an appropriate way. So thank you, Christy, for joining us.
Thank you, Christy. Dr. Coleman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to, the grant, I'm certainly going to be supportive of this grant request, Dr. Coleman. I think that as I was listening to school board member Atul Gupta, I would concur in the overall philosophy of what I like to do, a complete combing of our community. That I believe that there are some nuggets, some jewels, some hidden treasures within our community that have not necessarily been brought into the equation of how we deal with any of our gaps in terms of opportunities, achievement gaps certainly being one of them. And I think that as persons are planning on the implementation of this grant and the writing of others, that we would recognize that one of the major issues for us in a post-COVID-19 world is total community engagement and building assets. And all of our universities, and I heard Dr. Gupta mention VUL as one of them, as well as all of our institutions, can be key players in helping resolving some of these dilemmas. And we're going to need everybody to deal with what kids are going to be facing when they return to school.
Absolutely.
This is up for action tonight. Or if there are not any more questions, is there a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Who did the second?
James Coleman.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Any further discussion? Call vote. Mrs. Evans?
Yes.
Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mrs. Morrison, yes. Dr. Nillis?
Yes.
Dr. Sinai?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
Thank you. That now takes us to the personnel report. This is up for approval tonight. Is there a motion to approve the personnel report? I'm sure that Dr. Edwards will make some comments after we approve it.
I move that we approve the personnel report.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter. Ms. Carter, is there a second?
I would second that.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. It's up for a vote. Mrs. Evans?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Ms. Carter?
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mrs. Morrison, yes. Dr. Nillis?
Yes.
Dr. Sinai?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Well,
Whoops.
I'm actually going to pass that ball to our new HR director, Ms. Sellers, and let her just say a couple brief words about the two candidates that you all just approved.
Okay, no, thank you. So as you can see from the personnel report, we do have two candidates that are moving into new roles. And we're excited to share that Renee Anderson, as you can see, she was an assistant principal. She'll be moving to a PK coordinator at Hutcherson Early Learning Center. So we're really excited and we want to congratulate her. She's very excited. So it's good to see when staff is excited about their new opportunities. So all the best to Renee. And then we have James Aaron. He goes by Aaron Mabry, and he is an assistant principal moving to an associate principal at EC Glass. So we're really excited for him. He's ecstatic. It's a great opportunity for him. And we want to wish each of them great success in their new roles and say congratulations to them.
Absolutely. And our work isn't done there because with the movement of Renee, and by the way, Renee was at one of the schools, RS Payne has a preschool in it. So she's been able to work with the preschool faculty there and the students and families. But Renee is an assistant principal. So we have an assistant principal position open at RS Payne with that approval of her being our pre-K coordinator. And then Aaron, you'll know, was also an assistant principal at EC Glass, and him taking over the associate principal position at Glass, which is Ms. Floor's former position, leaves another assistant principal position open. So we now have two APs positions to fill as a result of that. And I just want to speak a little bit to something that Dr. Gupta is always talking about, and I think you call it succession planning and I call it capacity building, but it's on the same lines, because when you have these wonderful opportunities and you pluck your own people, then you have to fill your own people. But I will just give a shout out and a plug for the last 12 weeks of working under the COVID conditions, mixing everybody up, giving teacher leaders the opportunities to take new roles. Some of our supervisors, people have had opportunity for leadership. And I feel very strongly about, you won't get great leaders unless you teach them how to be great leaders by giving them opportunity to be great leaders in a safe environment. So as we do look forward to filling assistant principal positions, as we evaluate that moving forward, I do want to let everyone know that I am very committed to making sure that our staff have a wealth of experiences so that none of us, including myself, find ourselves where we don't have replacements or we don't have someone who can pick up the ball or hold it down in case, with this COVID thing, any one of us could become, ill with it. I don't wish that on anybody, but we need good backups. And I just want to personally say thank you to all my team, because sometimes it's not easy opening that door and say, here's what I do, learn what I do, let me show you what I do. And my folks have been great. And you will see when I get to the next part that some of the people who are chairpersons, they aren't your typical principals and directors and all those folks. We have other people taking the lead to really make sure we do some fantastic things for LCS. But the work is not over as we look now for assistant principals to fill the void at those two schools.
Thank you both, Dr. Edwards and Mrs. Sellers. Congratulations to Ms. Anderson and Mr. Mayberry, and we'll look forward to meeting them both and spending time with them. I, of course, know Mr. Mayberry very well from class. That now moves us to C4. Very interesting topic, reopening of schools for the 2020-21 school year.
Absolutely. So this is probably the area that I spend the most time on Zoom calls between talking with superintendents across the Commonwealth, Dr. Lane, health officials, my neighboring superintendents, Region 5 superintendents, our own staff. I think we've racked up thousands of Zoom hours just thinking through what does return to learn look like here in Lynchburg City Schools. Just recently, and I have mine in a big binder, we got what I fondly refer to as the R3 document, where it's recover, redesign, and restart. And the thing that I want our public to know, our governor has been very public at his 2:00 press conference, letting us know how the Commonwealth was entering into different phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But what you didn't see behind the scenes is schools weren't entering in any of those when the Commonwealth was entering into those until we received this document, which was rather recent. And it's about 136-page document, which all of my folks on the Return to Learn Dream team have read, and subcommittees. So I want to take some time just to talk to the public, talk to the board about what we're doing. I'm just going to start with two things. One, nope, we don't have all the answers. We have lots of questions. And two, yes, we are trying to be patient with one another and patient as we work through some of the things that we have to do. So we want to be very public and very transparent. And in doing so, the document was released on Tuesday, I believe. I gave my folks about 48 hours to read 136 pages. We reconvened. And by Friday afternoon, we sent out a very open-ended survey to our families, students, staff, anyone. And if you haven't taken that survey, please do. And I have it open right now, and I'm looking at 813 responses to our survey, which is pretty high considering it's only been about not even a week, I don't think. But if you haven't, please do so. And let me explain why it's open-ended. We really thought through what are the questions we should be asking folks. And I know a few of them, and my colleagues, superintendents, we all know a few of them. But we didn't want to limit you telling us what's on your mind, because as talented as my team is, we might not be thinking about everything that you're thinking about. And I know this is exhaustive, and many of you wrote lots of paragraphs for us to read, and we are reading every single word. But we felt like we didn't want to miss a concern because we didn't think of it. And we wanted to make sure the community and different parts of the community might have different feelings and different things and different concerns. So that's first and foremost. We wanted to get enough information from you, from the community, to frame some questions so we can send out a targeted survey, asking things like, the bus transportation is the first thing that came up. What's the safety protocols? Are you even thinking that you're going to let your child ride the bus, or are you thinking, I'd love for there to be an option for me to drive my kid or drop my kid off? And we recognize that's not an option for everyone. Everyone doesn't have a car or transportation. So that's one of the issues. Other issues concern the blended learning. Some of you are very pro blended learning, where there's direct instruction that occurs, which is not something that we did consistently or made mandatory across the division in the spring. If you recall, in the spring, it hit us really quickly. We were struggling with access, so it was very difficult to say these assignments will be graded for a kid who may not have had access or internet or a device and things like that. So we looked at that a little differently. But going forward, we are looking at models of blended learning and other options and direct teaching. And again, the community, some of you are very for that, and great, that's going to keep my kids safe. I want that option. I can keep my child at home. And others of you don't like it at all. So we recognize that that is something that we have to consider when we look at options. School day, the media has reported, it's been out there. School won't look like it did this year. It won't be 5 days a week, 7 hours a day, guaranteed for every single kid. We have to prioritize school. We have to figure out how to get kids to school. Even the way the phases have been opening, phase 1, which we kind of never entered into phase 1, although we have the ability to enter into 2 and 3 now. Certain kids could come and have a face-to-face instruction. Phase 2, they opened it up to more, pre-K to 3, and then students with disabilities, ELL, English learners could come in. And then phase 3 would be everybody, but there are a lot of conditions that go along with that. And one of the things that I want to share with everyone, because you can imagine we're all getting lots of emails, is that this is my guidance. This is what we're held to following to the best of our ability. It has some flexibility, which I'm glad it does, but there are other areas where there isn't flexibility. The question of mass and children and staff, and think back to the days where a teacher would come over to your desk, privately talk to you, and go over a problem with you right there at your desk. That type of up close personal contact, which we know has been great when you're doing tutoring within a classroom, that's going to require that teachers wear masks. It's not optional. For safety reasons, it may require that children wear masks too. And I know just from the feedback, some of our community members are pro-mask on their children and some of them aren't. Some of them don't mind it for the high schoolers. Some of them do, mind it. So those are the things that we are struggling with as we develop our plans. The day after the press conference, some folks were like, just open the schools. It's not that simple. The first thing we have to do is submit what is called a health mitigation plan. And it's pretty intensive, and it talks about how we're going to keep kids, staff, families safe, how we're going to minimize the use of large communal spaces, how are we going to keep people 6 feet apart, children 6 feet apart, how are we going to rearrange our classrooms. And if you've been in some of our classrooms that hold upwards to 25 students, we can't do that anymore. We can't hold 25 kids. It talks about how are we going to clean equipment, buses, multi-use spaces, bathrooms, in between usage, and what does that look like? What are our hygiene practices as far as just opening the school? So that is the first thing that we actually have to do before we can enter phase 2, and we have a team of folks working on that. There's also an instructional plan that we have to submit, which talks about how we're going to provide instruction, what options are we going to have. We need to have a plan for if someone tests positive, what does that mean? And as a parent myself, I would want to know that question. When I'm reading this feedback, you want to know that question. So what we've done to get ready for this is we've taken our team and divided it into subcommittees. So we have 9 subcommittees, and the subcommittees have upwards to 5 to 10 people on the official subcommittee, and they have the ability to invite more to be on the subcommittee, to be a consultant, to be a focus group, to be a source of information, to be input. So each of these groups, I imagine, are growing larger as we speak, depending upon what they are. And I've shared with the board, but let me share with the community. The big committee is the organizational one. That's the one that's looking at the school calendar. We made a change to the BASS year-round school calendar. We put BASS on the same calendar as the rest of the division to make it a little bit easier to address issues from a division and a school perspective, but also to ensure equity. We want to make sure that whatever services we put in place, BASS students and BASS families also get it. This is the group that's looking at transportation, and the initial guidance for phase 1, 10 kids on the bus. Phase 2 and phase 3, 6 feet on a bus. So there are some things that we could try to do if kids wear masks, some options, but that's the CDC guidance and the VDH guidance that we're getting moving forward. Nutrition and food service, they're discouraging us from using large spaces. Are we eating lunch in classrooms? That means we need to keep the food at the right temperature as we move it from room to room to room. And thank you, Beth, for looking at different options for that. And just our facilities, there are a lot of community partners out there ready to get in and use our gyms and our playgrounds and our fields. We need to talk about the health mitigation plan as you use these items. Who's cleaning them? How frequently are we cleaning them? Are you maintaining, particularly with athletics, it goes out to 10 feet of space. What does that mean? What's the difference between practice and summer conditioning? Is that defined? And which sports, like golf is a sort of a single sport, but football is a contact sport. What does that mean? So all of that is being vetted as we speak. And that's pretty much part of the organizational team and the safety response team. We do have an athletics and extracurricular team as well. And our chair there is one of our trainers who is working with Billy Hahn on VHSL. And they have a meeting next week, I believe, is when VHSL is meeting. So we're still waiting for guidance from that. So I know we want to get busy with that. But my one commitment to everybody is, as I said to my teams, we want to educate the whole child, not just the SOL testing child, not just the core content area child, not just the young child, not just the old child, but the whole child. So we are looking for ways that we can blend in that academic learning, but also include commitment to art and music and drama and theater and sports and healthy living, all of the things that make a child's educational experience enriching, not just the academic parts of it. So we have groups of folks who are working on those things. We have a family and community engagement team. COVID has been rough on some families. We need to connect with them. And if we move to things like alternate day or half days, the big concern that I'm seeing from our parents are, I have to work. Where are my children going to be? So we're trying to reach out to community partners and see, can we do some virtual learning offline? Will kids be able to go to some of these community partnerships as well? So there is a whole team that does that. And then there are just grade level teams of pre-K to 3, because in phase 2, those are the first children that can actually come back for in-person instruction, pre-K to 3. It's limited to that in phase 2. We are not cleared for phase 3 yet. And the governor said today that we're not moving to phase 3 on Friday. He's holding on that, and we'll give more information on Thursday. In addition to pre-K to 3, students with disabilities and English learners are also in that group. Everybody else is in phase 3, not phase 2. But we have a 4th through 5th grade team, a 6th through 8th grade team, a 9th through 12th grade team, and then what I'm calling special populations. So these are kids that are EL, our students with disabilities. They could be at-risk kids that we've just identified as, these children have lost a lot and they're in danger of graduating. They might be high school kids. We want them, and I want to apply for a variance to bring them in. Or these children, experience so much trauma. We want them. We want to start working with them, and I want to bring them in. So the flexibility of applying for variances and sending those to the Department of Ed, I'm very grateful for that ability to do that, but I also want to be very purposeful about the children and the services that we bring in. So we do have that. In our survey, we asked families, students, community members, community partners, leaders, if you would be interested in being on a focus group. As these committees do their work, they're going to need to reach out to parents or guardians or community partners to say, hey, are you willing to do this? Can you help us with this? What are your concerns with this? Vet this, look at this. Let's get some questions with this. So we do have a list. Like I said, there's 814 responses now on the survey. So we do have folks who are interested in working with us to help us do this. Timeline. So, and we're trying to stay together as a group of area superintendents, and here's why. Many of my staff don't live in Lynchburg City Schools. They live in Bedford, they live in Campbell, they live in Amherst. And if our school divisions across counties and the city are so very different, it might make it hard for my staff to come to work if their children aren't in school. So we as area leaders are also trying to work together and support one another, because we recognize that our teachers are parents too. They have kids and families. Our staff have kids that they need to take care of. And that's something that our family and community engagement folks are also looking at, but we're looking at it as a group where we do that. We also have overlap. We have kids that are in dual enrollment, the Gov school, other places that have other schedules and other staff. And we've talked a lot about that. So it's important for us to engage in the community. We are hopeful that before somewhere around our July 7th, that's ambitious, I will say, ambitious. We will have our, at least our phase 2 health mitigation plan up and running, and phase 2 instructional plan. Phase 3, maybe not, depends on how quickly we can work and how fast things change, and what the climate is in terms of any new COVID cases. We seem to be trending down, as the governor said, but we haven't seen if there's any new cases as a result to a lot of people being out with some of the protests and things like that. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I wanted to just kind of open it up and say that we did our initial survey, which was open-ended. It was purposeful because we wanted to hear from you. There will be more targeted, specific surveys that just asks things like the transportation issue, like the blended learning. Some parents are just very concerned and they're saying, I want my child to be at Lynchburg City Schools, but I'm concerned about a brick and mortar. I'm concerned about them being in the building. Will there be an option for them to still be a Lynchburg City School student and do some virtual learning or blended learning? So all of that is where we are and what we're working on right now. And I will say, I'm looking at some of the members on those subcommittees. It's a very intense, extremely emotional time with a lot of unknowns. A lot of unknowns in terms of what we're predicting. But I will say our number one mission is to keep our staff and students safe. We have been practicing at the admin building what it feels like to work in a space where we're keeping 6 feet apart. And when we leave our offices and we go to the ladies' room or go to another office, we're wearing our masks. We've put in and out boxes in different places so that we can reduce contact, because the adults need to practice this. We really need to practice this if we're going to be role models for children, model it for children, and hold children accountable. So we've started that practice at the admin building the last 2 days. I'm so proud of my staff. We all walk around looking like masked rangers there when everybody's got a mask on, but we're doing it just to be safe. And the reason why we're doing it is because we're not sure who's asymptomatic, not showing symptoms. And we know that that's a real possibility. So for my staff, I just say, assume you might be asymptomatic. You don't want to risk anyone else's health. So let's all be safe. So that's what we put in place. And we want to get that right so that we get it right for the children when they come in. And I'm going to be quiet because I talked a lot and I want to take some questions from you all from all the information that I've given you.
I have a question if Madam Chair allows.
Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. So this Recover, Redesign, Restart 2020 is on DOE's website.
Yes.
What mechanisms, have you put a link on our LCS website so parents can access their plan?
I don't know if we have a link as much as we have our information. I will check with Scott to see that, but I will definitely do that. We did send it out when we were sending out our survey that it was on there.
And this health mitigation plan, could you share with the board? I have not seen, I may have missed that email. The health mitigation plan you have developed. That was my...
We have not developed it. So you haven't seen it. I have the questions in front of us. They have made it a PDF so we could actually see the questions that we have to answer. But it talks about, here, I'll just give you an example. What are your cleaning protocols for transportation vehicles? What's your schedule for increased cleaning, routine cleaning? All of those kinds of things that we have to put in our plan. And a lot of that will be determined by how we transport children and what spaces we're using. So it's
what you're saying is it's in line with the health plan guidance issued by DOE.
Oh yeah. Oh, everything has to be aligned. And everything, once we get our plans together, I forgot to mention this to the public, that they all have to be posted on our website. We would have done that anyhow, but they do have to be posted on our website. But before we finalize our plans and think we get it right and we got it right, that's why we wanted to engage the community before the plans are finished, rather than giving you something and saying, here's the plan, and we have to go back and redo it.
So what mechanisms do we have in place for the hard work of all these committees to trickle down to our stakeholders, which are students and their families?
So the first thing we did with our survey is the survey results, Denise put that together for us. All 800 and some odd, I forget what the count is right now, are going to the committee chairs, the directors, and the principals. The committee chairs, there have been other people that they have invited to their subcommittees. So if you are a parent, employee, community leader, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, things like that, you might want to be on a subcommittee to assist with that. We have in this document that are in the survey results, we asked for who wanted to be on a focus group because I'm imagining that my family and community engagement folks want to talk to parents and caregivers. So we already have folks who signed up to be an immediate focus group. And the reason why we're doing it so fast is because we are really limited in time. So we can't leave surveys up for weeks like we normally do because we're talking days trying to get this together and get ready for the upcoming school year. So there are opportunities for folks to do that if they fill out the survey. If you contact any LCS person and say, hey, I'm interested, we've been moving that to the right committee. So all of my folks out there who are interested in sports and athletics and extracurricular and everything, I've been sending them to the way of the athletics and extracurricular committee.
Ms. Evans has a question.
I just had a quick question. When you get these, like phase 2, your plan approved, are y'all immediately moving through to work on your phase 3 plan, hoping that that's where we're going to be?
Yeah, we're working on both phase 2 and 3 simultaneously.
Okay.
Because we don't, as you know, we never know what phase we're going to be
Right.
in and how soon and how quickly we're doing that. One of the biggest things is the calendar and whether or not, you know, there's a discussion, do you move it back? Do you leave it for the young ones? So that is one of our top discussions. On the guidance that I shared with you all, I kind of outlined some things that each committee is focusing on. And then I gave them page numbers in the document where there's a series of questions and steps and things that they must follow. And probably more importantly, and I didn't say any of this at the beginning, each one of these things comes with an overlap of equity. So there's a whole equity session that says, so you think you're done, now go back and answer these questions and make sure that what you're doing, you've considered the equity issues and you know, you've addressed them and mitigated them or have alternate plans to address them, because that's going to be very important. Also, it's an important part of the plan.
Well, and then the second part, kind of my question is that and I know there's been a big concern about high school sports starting, or just starting, not necessarily sports, but the off-season training and just getting the group together. But we have to be approved for your phase 2 plan in order for them to be able to do that. Is that correct?
So we have to be approved on the health mitigation. There's 2 parts of the plan. There's a health plan and then there's an instructional plan. So the health mitigation piece for schools to say we're ready to move into phase 2, that health piece has to be submitted first. Now, that takes about a day to be approved, so it's quick.
Right.
But if you look at everything that we have to put in it, it's thorough, and we want to make sure that we're thorough. And I do believe we have the flexibility to go back and adjust it if we need to adjust it. But you can imagine the people who have to read these plans are discouraging us from making multiple updates, because then they're reading it over and over again.
Do we have any proposed idea of when that plan will be done?
Yeah, so my target deadline, our very aggressive deadline, is by the time we get to the July 7th board meeting, we should have at minimum our health mitigation plan up and running, if not a good substantial part of our phase 2 and the beginnings of a phase 3 plan for you all, for the board to be looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Carter has a question.
Oh, you're muted.
Well, one, I just start with the health mediation plans. Can you just share, because sometimes people don't understand the amount of work that goes into those plans. Can you share some of the things that you're looking at, that we're looking at that we have to address for that?
Sure. I can tell you the first part of it is planning to reopen. So that's just training. Everybody in LCS has to be trained on health mitigation and what their personal responsibility is, what their responsibility to their colleagues is, and what their responsibility to children, family, and public members are. So we have to show that we did a training program and that everybody has been trained in the appropriate protocols. And you can imagine for bus drivers, nutrition workers, and custodians, the cleaning protocols training, because you have to be safe there. So there's that piece. We have to promote behaviors that reduce the spread of COVID. So it talks about physical distancing. So our plan should show, how do our classrooms look different? We have to go in every single classroom and remap out those desks and make sure they're all 6 feet apart. And right now, if we go with pre-COVID classrooms, most of them aren't. And then we have classrooms that have tables, because we like collaboration. So we would put kids around. So we have to do something different than that as well. We also have to make sure that we do some training for kids as well. And the important part, the nurses are going to love this: stay home when you're sick, what parents can do at home in terms of taking children's temperature, monitoring them before we get them on the school bus. We are responsible for a daily check of our kids. And that's been interesting discussions about, are you taking temperatures at the bus stop? And then, of course, if you're standing outside, temperature is going to affect the no-touch scan at the bus stop. If it's too hot, too cold, that might give you a false reading. And you want to avoid having lines. You don't want children standing in a line waiting to get their temperature taken. So that has to be worked out in the plan. What does the screening of your children look like in the plan? What does your daily cleaning, doorknobs, right? Think of things that kids touch all the time. How are we going to make sure that we address those things? Ventilation. And we know it's important for kids to be outside. So planning in some of those outside things, but think about using the playground and having, class 1, then class 2, class 3. We're trying to keep the kids in cohorts. In terms of the operations, looking at our sick leave policies and all that stuff. What happens if a staff member tests positive? What do we do? Is it a classroom? Is it a building? Is it a mandatory contact tracing? Working with the health department. All of that for both staff and students. What do we do? Attendance. Don't sleep on school. We have attendance policies. Well, if I'm sick, or if I've tested positive, we've got to look at all of that kind of thing. And then just looking at vulnerable populations and what we do with vulnerable populations. What does re-entry look like? And what happens if a substantial population or essential personnel, we have COVID failure, so to speak. I'll call it COVID failure. Let's say we have a substantial number of bus drivers who test positive for COVID, and that takes out our fleet, it takes out our instruction. What are your backup plans for those kinds of things? So those are just, and I just read the brief, a little bit of the brief of things that we need to be looking at. That doesn't talk about what content we're teaching them. That's just all of the safety precautions. PPE, making sure that we have masks available for staff, cleaning products, hand sanitizer, soap in the bathroom. Special education staff, particularly our students, particularly those who are hearing impaired, having face shields so they can read lips, because masks, they need to engage in facial expressions and things like that. We need to account for all of that. So it's not as easy as just saying, yep, we're going to clean equipment, we're done, and submit something like that.
The other question is, so it's possible that some students may start before others? Or
yes.
We looking at like the priority that have been identified as the priority students?
The way the phase guidance is written in phase 2, which if we get a phase 2 mitigation plan and we can go into phase 2, we can have pre-K through 3rd, EL, and students with disabilities start. We can also apply for what's called a variance for any other group or population if we can make a case for why I think these kids need to start and have some in-person learning. Direct virtual teaching, you don't need a mitigation plan for if you're just doing online teaching. But our staff has not been trained in using and doing direct teaching online. We have some phenomenal folks who know how to do it, and they're rock stars, but it wasn't mandatory, and we didn't have a learning management system, and we did no training, because teaching in the classroom is very different than teaching. Those of you who are taking a recent college class online, you understand that it's a little bit different doing that.
The other thing is, I know some schools, they require their parents to take a temperature and send that information to the schools. And that's a good protection for you, just in case that there's a major or significant difference in the temperature, so that it won't be said the child caught or, contracted the COVID-19 at the school versus. So is that something that we're looking at, or we're looking at doing the scans, or how are we going to monitor?
That's what the safety and response team subcommittee, I should say, is looking at and reviewing. And part of what they're doing, because this is new for all of us, and I will say, I spent a considerable amount of time with the soup from Bedford, from Campbell, from Amherst, and so do their counterparts. I'm looking at Ethel. I know she talks to equity officers across the Commonwealth. Our nurses are talking to nurses and nurse coordinators across the Commonwealth. And what we're trying to do is get best practices without being cumbersome, and also the equity issues. So if we're saying, everyone has to have a no-touch thermometer, one, they're in short supply, and two, what happens if I can't afford to get one? Are you providing us with one, and things like that? So.
And another thing is, so now, before, students could move the desk and chairs everywhere. And how do we look at these to make sure we maintain the social distancing, but don't put an added burden of a lot of disciplinary or referrals because a child is moving the desk? And you may have said it once or twice, but before they've been able to move, and now there's a different way. So we'll do education on that, I'm sure.
Yes.
But how can we do it without referrals?
Part of and that's why I said we're educating the whole child. So it's not just about following the rules, it's understanding, what's going on in the little minds, because first of all, our kids haven't been in a school environment in quite some time. And if you just watch us adults, when we see each other, what we want to do and hug and like, we miss you, kids are going to want to do that. And no, I do not want to suspend a child because you've seen your friend you haven't seen in 6 months, and now you want to give them a hug, and we're discouraging hugging. That's where the child training comes in. And I think if we're proactive, and part of our curriculum, I added it into every grade level, is teaching kids about personal safety. So we don't assume that they know, or that we just wrote it on a piece of paper and there's rule number 7 and you violated it, as much as we teach them the why behind the personal safety, and just how to stay safe. And that's going to have to apply for adults too. I'm going to say, adults are going to need some help with that as well.
And one more is, how was the survey distributed regarding the one that has received 800 and some responses?
So Cindy Babb put out a blast on the Cindy Babb social media, Facebook website. So it's up on our website. And then we had asked some folks to I've seen on their Facebook pages, hey, whatever group I'm in, PTO, if you haven't taken the survey, take the survey. I do want to reach out to, and I don't know if they've done, they may have talked to faith-based leaders and other people who are in a leadership role who have access to people, so that we get the most amount of responses and we hit all avenues of the community. And then there's always just and I'm gonna put Ethel on the spot, but I know she's gonna call some folks and ask them if they don't participate in the survey, just to make sure we're hearing all voices and we're being mindful of all of our children, not just the early sign-ons.
And do you have any concrete way that the community can help? I know we have the partners in ed, and that I'm sure we reached out to them, but any other concrete ways that the community can really help with trying to prepare the students, or with any other concerns, or how they can asked to get on these committees, if they haven't been asked and they feel like they should be at the table?
I know that we talked with folks at the Business Alliance today because a lot of our families work at local businesses. So if we can get the local businesses to also get the word out, and we're working with them to do somewhat of a joint not press release, but communication from the area superintendents. All 5 of us are doing something like that so that we can get access to the people who have children. I will tell you the biggest thing that I'm reading, the biggest concern is for most of us, it looks like it's going to be some sort of alternate or staggered type day. And the big concern is what happens on those other days. Where is my child going to be? And that concern is for parents, but it's also for employees who have children who, if I need to be here 5 days a week, but my kid's only going to school 2 days a week, how can we help? So I think that's one of the first areas of, we're looking at divisions that have used other spaces. And you know, there's lots of legal things. So if we use the basement of a church because they got a nice big room and we could fit 12 kids down there, can we send our staff? Can we do our choice board off? I call it the non-brick and mortar learning there. So it's my off day and I'm doing some learning and tutoring there. What are the insurance liabilities for using community partners and things like that? So just looking at that, and that's one of the reasons why we put community partner on there, so we can find out where some of these spaces and places. It would be easier if children have an area on an off day that they can walk to, and that if we can, and I don't know if we can, provide some staff that would be there and say, you know what, these 12 children are going to be here at this neighborhood center or this organization on the off day, and here's what they're going to do in terms of their work, whether they're working on choice boards or they have access to the internet and they can do some self-directed learning during those off days. But child care is probably the one of, next to safety, is probably one of the number one concerns that folks have right now. And then for folks who are concerned about even sending their kids to school, not that they don't love our school system, but they're just concerned about risk. What does the online or the virtual remote learning look like? Do we have meaningful options, which I will say to my community, it will look very different than it did this past spring. And I have 5 kids, so I can say, I'm pretty sure all 5 kids didn't wake up every day going, I can't wait for the choice board so I can just get right in and do this work that's not going to be graded, not going to be collected, not going to be any of that, blah, blah, blah. Not every kid responds very favorably to that, but we're going to have real school. So yes, it will count. It will be graded. It'll be part of your grade. It'll be meaningful. It'll be new learning. It'll be engaging. So very different than what we did in the spring.
Thank you. Dr. Brennan.
Yes, Dr. Edwards, thanks so much for that overview. That was really great. And, you know, since I sort of do this for a living, this is the sort of document I sort of enjoy reading, to see all 136 pages. And, you know, I'm so impressed by the detail that the state has given us, and talking, as you said, about cleaning and transportation and vulnerable learners, and even talking about attendance. And, you know, how do you measure attendance now? Just the granularity was very impressive. But one of the things that they talk about, which I know you are talking about now too, is communication to the families and to our community. You know, and we all totally agree that we need to educate the child, but I think we're also going to have to educate the community about why we are doing these things and how they need to be done, which it sounds like you're on the road to doing. Yeah. One comment about the survey, which I think is great, and I filled mine out, and I think it was a good start, is that they're just to make sure that you all do actually get those partners out there who we need to be part of the discussion, you know, in addition to family members and parents, but organization, as you've mentioned, the Boys and Girls Club, Live Healthy Lynchburg, I know they sent you a letter to support. I've been contacted by the pediatric psychiatrist at Centra to say they want to help, but to make sure those people are actually put on to their appropriate committee, and we don't miss those groups who I think can really help us. One of the things the document talks about is having a communication with our city council, our city government, and the public health department, almost like a task force, since obviously our school system is so tightly bound to city council, city government, and the public health, it'd be a great opportunity for us to sort of have that in some way. Right now, there's no joint effort by the different organizations to communicate together or to the public. The other thing that they talk a lot about, and you talk about a lot, is social emotional wellness. And that is talked about throughout this document along with equity. And one comment is that that is listed under each committee. And I wonder whether it's such a huge topic that it should be unto itself rather than trying to duplicate it, in different areas and have it be a separate entity that helps then work with the different committees. And then also speaking about that, the mental wellness for our staff. When we come down to all of this and we get the kids on the bus and we get them in the school and we screen them, they need to be taught. And that burden, obviously, and that job is falling upon our staff to do it, which is going to be phenomenal in this virtual world, real world. And, what do we do to support them? And the document also talks about that. So I know that's listed on your comment. And then the last thing I would just say is that it's interesting that the task force has suggested, and I didn't realize this till recently, that SOLs, the majority of SOLs are federally granted. And for that to be waived, it has to be a federal statement to do that, like 14 out of the 17. And the task force of this document has suggested that they be waived for the spring, which I think makes a tremendous amount of sense, since we're dealing with all these issues of children coming in. For the teachers and the children, they have to face some testing at the end of the year is going to be really difficult. And I don't know if you or Dr. Coleman have any comments about that as far as how we can help with it. But I thank you so much for what you're doing. It's such a extensive thing. As a baby boomer, I'm better reading it in print, and I'm going to have some copies made. And everybody on the board would like to have a copy, just let me know, and I'm happy to share it with you. Just like yours. I want that cover too. I like that cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Dr. Nilles?
Yeah, I think some of my questions have already been answered. One concern obviously is with the SOL testing. I recognize that's a federal requirement for No Child Left Behind, or Every Student Succeeds, or whatever the latest incarnation of that is. Has there been any discussion or talk or scuttlebutt or rumor at the state level regarding that?
Well, all of us superintendents, many of us, I won't say all of us, are very nervous that the same methods of accreditation are going to be held for schools, knowing that we have a different mission with children coming back now. So I know, at least my counterparts, we are all united in, we don't want that added pressure for our students and our families. We do recognize the need to assess children so we know where they are and where we need to shore up some gaps, or even, some kids may have taken this opportunity to really soar, and we don't want to bring them back to, here's some repeat learning. We want to continue to accelerate them. So my push was not to do SOLs and not have that burden. There was some discussion as to whether or not we wanted to use it just as an assessment tool, and then maybe you could use it for accreditation or maybe not. And I think united, we pretty much all said, let's just not have that hassle right now. But we do have to have methods of measuring growth for kids. And I know part of what's in Amy's budget with iExcel and a couple other tools that we use in reading literacy, I should say, and in mathematics will help us measure growth for kids.
So another related question, funding-wise, has to do with the staggered schedules and lots of remote learning, especially in the beginning. That's going to affect the ADM, which is basically student hours in class per day. Is that being looked at in terms of funding and that impact?
So that was a big question of ours. What counts as ADM, and how do we count kids as attending? So as long as we can, and there's some flexibility in that. So I'm hopeful that the option to go completely virtual is there, as long as I can assure up that the students are getting any additional services they need besides just curriculum. So are they getting school counseling services and any other services that we would provide for them? We can count them as Lynchburg City Schools, and they would count in our number with, as long as we can prove that there's regular engagement, assignments, grading, monitoring, and all of that, which was a little bit different than it was in the spring. So I'm hopeful that, and I really do give credit to the VDOE for having such levels of flexibility and recognizing that not every kid or not every parent or caregiver of a child is going to want to send them back initially. Some people are going to be like, let me just see, but they still want them to be in school. They still want them to be a part of school, and we still want to serve them. Our kids are our most important resource and commodity, and we want them back. And I want them back brick and mortar safely. I want them back virtually. I want them back social emotionally, the whole 9 yards. I just want my babies back. So the short answer is yes, there's flexibility. The long answer is there's probably another report I have to fill out and get approved to get that, and I'm certainly willing to do that.
I guess my final question, really more of a comment. Obviously, we're going to have to be ready to have a lot of PPE for the students and staff as well. Are we looking, has there been looking at maybe trying to coordinate with the surrounding divisions to work together as opposed to try to, instead of cutting each other off in line?
Yeah, I will say during this time, and Kim and Ethel and Amy, if you're still on the line, you guys can jump in. The one thing that I am thankful about, and the reason why I could sit here and still be upright, is from the degree of collaboration and support from my colleagues. So I know I've been working with all of the superintendents, and they've been great at, hey, let's try to do this together. Let's think through this together. And I know, Kim, you've reached out to different finance directors to talk about what are you doing with your funds? How are we handling these kinds of things? So, I can speak to the collaboration that we're having with, that I'm having with SUPS, but each one of us has a counterpart somewhere, or somewheres, I should say. So I don't know if you guys want to jump in and just say something about that real quick.
Sure, this is Amy. As in Region 5 technology directors, as well as other directors across the state, have been meeting with VDOE technology staff on a weekly basis to talk about things that we can collaborate on, including Wi-Fi access across our communities and access to devices, the solutions that each of us are looking at putting in place to solve those problems. So I do have a network that I've been meeting with on a weekly basis that has been very helpful.
Same with the finance. We have the Region 5. We meet every week. We have a Zoom call and we share. And one of the questions has been, the availability of PPE. And if we will forward if we see a good deal or something that's actually available. So we are definitely networking.
And I believe VDOE said today that they are putting a list of approved vendors, because you can imagine there's probably a lot of scam artists going on out here. So there may be something on their website. I'm going to check again later on to see for PPE and things like that.
Thank you. Dr. Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clearly, this 180-day school year will not be traditional. And it's equally clear to me that COVID-19 has exacerbated the inequities that existed far before, but it's just made it clear. My hat goes off to you, Dr. Edwards, as I'm sure all of our board members and your 132, you being one of them, school superintendents across Virginia. But your task is hard. And none of us on this board are not aware of that. At the same time, we have a community that is going to really hold us to task. And a lot of times when you're trying to say something about one group, the other group will feel a certain type of way. People don't want to hear a lot of talk. They're not interested in people talking from departments and then not actually doing the work necessary to make it happen. Even when it comes to health, we've got some people with serious health challenges, kids, and they don't want talk, they want action. And of course, it's our board's responsibility to hold you and your team accountable in that regard. What would you want to say? You know, the passion that Ethel is bringing with all of this survey business and all of that, but what do you want to say to the public about, you know, in summation, I guess, of how you're going to do that? Because we have to hold you accountable. This is a hard job, but there are a lot of folk who are very passionate about what's happening.
Absolutely. I'm one of those folks who's very passionate about what's happening. You know, it's the business that we're in. And I welcome the accountability because, like I said, there are kids. So if we're not being held accountable, shame on us as an educational foundation and a community. For my community, I will say that I'm cautious, I'm slow, and I'm steady when I'm doing something. So, and I know I'm frustrating people because they want the rush answer and I want the safe answer. I want to make sure our kids are safe. I also value and absolutely adore my staff. And I would never put my staff in a position where they can't be successful and they're going to let down the children. And my staff is very committed. I mean, they work some insane hours. But when you look at what it's going to take for, let's just go with the secondary folks, for a truly good virtual learning, that is not something where someone would say to me, there's a 1-hour PD on how to teach online, give that to your teachers and then let's go. That's not how we're gonna do it. So I do need some time to get the adults ready, to fortify the adults so that they could be the most successful adults for the sake of the children. And we are, and I will say to the community, and I'm trying to be as ambitious, but if I need to move a timeline, I'll move a timeline. We're trying to stick to, I think our kids are due to come back on August 12th. So we're trying to at least get that first cohort of kids, those pre-K to 3 kids, back in here on August 12th. And everybody else will work out some other thing for, but that's a short time away when you think about it. But I am committed to getting the kids back to school, back to learning. And I will tell you, in all of these subgroups, and somebody asked, well, why is that in every single group? Why is that, why is anti-bullying in everybody's group? Why is social emotional learning? Because that's my way of holding everybody accountable. It was in your group too. You're supposed to be looking at these things. You're supposed to be teaching kids more than just the content area. So, but I'm gonna need the community's help. So when we do put out surveys and we do ask for input, and I'm very grateful to the number of people who responded, and I'm hopeful by the time this airs and streams, there'll be more. But when we're reaching out to you, just know we're talking days, not weeks. And we need your honest feedback. And to be understanding that, and I had some people say to me, I don't care what the governor says. I don't care what your regulations say. If you don't do this, then you're not doing your job. And I have to disagree with them that my job is part of, to the best of my ability, giving a great service within those regulations. So I think we need understanding on both ends. The understanding on our end that, we have to serve all children and that we have to address those equity issues. And we can't get comfortable saying COVID did it. COVID may have did it, but we got to fix it. So, and that's our charge. But I also need my public to understand and be realistic with us where, and I'll just start with transportation. If we can't transport 50, 60 kids at a time and we have to do an alternate schedule, it's not because we're just saying that we don't want to transport 50, 60 kids at a time. It's because we're trying to make the best decisions to keep everybody healthy. And in helping us, an adult, the best thing you can do for your children is help them adjust to this time and understanding that your teacher might be wearing a mask and you may not be able to sit real close to your buddy. And if parents and caregivers help us with those messages and help children, and remember, I always say this, the world is the first classroom. So if kids want to see how to do something, they watching us and they not just saying, oh, you're not a teacher. They're watching all of us adults. So every time we're taking them to stores that say, wear your mask, and they see all of us not doing it, when they come to classrooms and we have rules, how can we enforce them if we're not modeling that kind of stuff out in the community? And it goes more to just my personal feeling that I don't like the mask. It makes me hot, makes me sweat. It, oh gosh, and I, all the things that we don't like it for, it's a higher calling when we're trying to keep our kids safe. So that would be my spiel. I need your help. I welcome it. We all have thick skins here in Lynchburg City Schools. That's one of our training. We don't take it personal. We understand, but we want to work with our community and we want to help our kids.
Dr. Coleman, do you have any more questions?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Carter, you said you had one more question.
Yes, I know Dr. Edwards said that this will be real school and all of the activities will be graded. Have we really found a true solution to internet access? Because not everyone has that. And if there's some virtual homework and you can't get to it, or your connection is poor, then that will have some impact on your being able to follow through and complete assignments.
So one of the things that I charged my groups with, and one of the reasons why I created a special populations group, is that we have to differentiate and prioritize in-person brick and mortar time. So if you are a child who you may live in an area where even if we gave you a device, there's nothing that you can hook up to because the Wi-Fi or the access of broadband, all of that is so spotty it wouldn't work anyhow. You might be that child that needs priority time because of that, or it might be an economic thing, or it just might be a learning style thing. You could have access and still not function well in a purely virtual environment. And that's where the family piece comes in for us to know our kids and be able to say, all right, well, here's my classroom. I'm looking at all of you right now. And this group of children, online doesn't work for them. They don't progress. And I would like to put in a variance to have them come in, these days, or maybe if everybody's doing 2 days a week, these children are getting an extra third day a week. So we are going to have to differentiate. So and we say this all the time, equity does not mean equal. So you can't count your minutes and say, I got 120 minutes and Dr. Coleman got 150 minutes. Why? Because equitably, Dr. Coleman needed 150 minutes. I needed 120, so that's the kind of hard decisions and things I'm going to have to make, because some of my babies need lots of minutes and they deserve it. So we have to give it to them.
Dr. Gupta, you said you had a question.
Yes, ma'am. So going back to Dr. Coleman's question, if I'm a teacher sitting there and you're going to expect me to use Canvas 50 days out, I understand Dream Team and I understand redesign and all these slogans. Has the training started yet?
No. So and again, go back to me being cautious and slow with it. So I do have some teachers who are experienced with online learning, and I have a lot who aren't, but they're gung-ho and they're quick studies and that kind of stuff. So we want to be mindful of comfort level, and the same way we want to take it with our children and make sure we're meeting them where they are and helping them grow and develop. We want to do that with our staff as well. So we have not started the official training. It's on our first to-do list, and more for secondary folks, because we anticipate more secondary people will have to do this than pre-K and K and 1 at that level. and providing significant time for them to do it. So we might have to adjust our calendar and the way we do PD and all of that to accommodate some of these things. And part of that is in our CARES Act funding and some of our other training things. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we're gonna have to look at staff differently. We have to look at time differently. And I'm waiting for, you know, the group to, I got a meeting with the chair people tomorrow, but I'm waiting for the group to give me their ideas. But you know, it might be I'm a staff member and I'm just a great virtual direct teacher, and maybe my hours aren't 8 to 3. Maybe I'm the one that's doing the nighttime stuff for those children whom the nighttime stuff works with, and that's what my day looks like. And you still getting my time, you still getting the bang for the buck. And maybe during the day, because I got childcare issues, that's what I'm dealing with. So as employers, we have to look at our staff and say, what kind of flexible things can we do with staff as well as families and students? And it's just really, we're not even thinking outside the box. The box isn't even there. So it's just kick the box to the side and really look at what's your talent, what's your gift, what can you bring to the table in terms of moving my kids, and how can we make that work in this new environment that we have.
So when do you think there'll be an action plan ready by your group? Because
I'm hopeful that we'll have something it might be rough and raw, but at least in a discussionable form for the July 7th board meeting. Definitely mitigate our health mitigation plans and our phase 1 plans, phase 2 plans coming forward with that. But that's our target date. I'll know more tomorrow because I meet with the chair people, and it's important for each of the chair people to talk across the subcommittee so that one subcommittee doesn't go one way and another subcommittee goes another way. But I'll have that. And then what we want to do is, remember when we were doing the first the feeding program, the meal service, when we first started and we were transporting things, and it was like a communication every other night, felt like, to families. We do want to just have either pick 2 days a week that we're just like, here's your family blast. It might be Sunday night blast, just to, here's what you need to know, here's where we are. So folks can kind of stay abreast of where we are, what we've accomplished, what's next, that kind of thing, as well as give us feedback and input.
The supply chain constraints will be there. It's not as agile. So going back to PPE, what's your timeline? What do you think you will get your shipments in for August start date? When would you like to have PPE in stock?
I will say Steve is a very, Steve was ordering before we were getting here because he knew that we would need some stuff. So we have some stuff in place already because we've been operating our command centers and slowly opening back up. But he definitely was on it. I will say it's been a little bit more open and less like it was with the toilet paper where we couldn't find any of it. There are vendors that are working directly with schools now because they understand the need for a quick turnaround. But I'm really impressed with Steve and his ability to, he was on it weeks ago.
Any additional questions? Dr. Edwards, thank you so much.
Sorry, I had one
Mel has a
question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just, I've had a lot of parents ask me, and I think I'm learned stuff tonight that I didn't know. So I want to be very realistic to them. And I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Your goal for August 12th is your K through 3.
That's what I'm shooting.
So
pre-K.
Okay.
Pre-K.
So pre-K through 3. So, and that's in school. Is your goal for 4 through 12 to also start learning at that point, even though it's not in the school? Even though we're not in the building at that point, are you still planning on those guys starting a year then as well?
I can't say for sure what will be available for the very reason that if you're not in the building, let me back up. All of our learning choice boards, the stuff that we did in the spring is still available and still an option. But that, as we know, that requires that the parent is helping teach the kid. I need to make sure the teachers are ready to teach the children online. And a lot of that will depend on the how quickly we can get people up to speed to do some virtual teaching. Now, think outside the box again, because you know me, I kick the box. If I have a group of teachers who are in a particular grade level who are all really great and awesome and they can do it, they actually might be the virtual teachers for more than just their building or something like we might have things like that, because they can get the learning going while the others are getting up to speed. So I don't want the equity issues of saying, oh, dag, I got Dr. Edwards and she's terrible at online teaching and that's who I have. And you got Miss Maservi and she's the bomb. And then we have equity issues. So I want to make sure.
That's my question more so is, even if you had phase 3 approved, you don't see middle and high school being able to start in August, even if we were at that point?
I'm hard pressed on June 16th with the guidance that I have and the transportation things that I have to kind of work out to say that I'll have a solid brick and mortar schedule for them. The virtual piece I may be able to hit, but like Kim said, with promising something that I have a team. And I will say to you all, you know, this is a very difficult place to be in as a superintendent, because you know we want to be able to answer everything. We want to be in control of everything. And this is one where I truly am going to have to, because of the short window of time, delegate this to some great teamwork. So I'm awaiting to see where they are. I will tell you this, Miss Evans, this when we mixed up over the spring and we were doing choice boards, my original thing was like, okay, we're going to get it done. And I saw it as being a choice board a week, and that each week, that's how much time it would take the teachers. About 2 weeks in, my staff was on fire and they were like, we're on week 7, we're on week 8, and they moved to do some amazing things. I mean, we accomplished things during that time that weren't on my radar, and I didn't stand in their way. And I'm hopeful that that same energy and that same creativity will be here, because I'm not the only one that missed the students, the teachers, the staff miss them too.
Well, I don't want any of my questions to be a reflection of what the teachers can and can't do, because I think that they are absolutely amazing and will rise to the challenge. It was more so for parents to have some planning, because when we look at phase 3 of what the governor said, as a parent and a layperson, not being a doctor, it made it sound like we could pick up 20 people on the school bus if they had their mask on, because he said if they're not 6 feet apart, you had to wear a mask. They also said in phase 3 that all students could go to school. So as a parent, you're kind of sitting back thinking, okay, if that's where we are, why aren't we all starting in August? So I was just trying to get it kind of spelled out where we were so parents can plan. Even though the kids are older, they still have to make a plan for these kids if they're not in school in August. And it sounds to me like that's kind of where we'll be, at least to start the year, maybe the rest of August. We don't know how long, but these parents need to know that that's a very likely possibility, that that's going to happen, and they need to be prepared for that.
I agree with you. And that's one of the frustrating parts about trying to do this and trying to guess timelines and things like that. So I am hopeful that by our next board meeting, we'll be able to at least answer that question and have some semblance of here's what life might be like, or what some options.
Well, and I think you did a good job explaining everything that has to happen and everything that has to happen with these teachers. And hopefully parents got an understanding from listening to this, where we are and how much has to be done in order to get kids back in school. It's not going to be easy for anybody. So thank you.
Yeah, I would encourage people to actually, not that I want them to read a 136-page document, but you'll get a better sense of the questions and the things that have to be put in place for schools to successfully move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and the Return to Learn team as you work through this, and we'll look forward to hearing more. I would encourage all parents to complete the survey. I would like to end this conversation by saying that don't forget you have an energized board, and that if you need something from us, we are willing to do what we need to do. And I've gotten that from every board member. And so please feel free to use us if we can help you.
Okay, you can start by getting your CDLs so that we could drive buses and
I have a feeling I'm going to be driving a lot of carpools.
maybe.
Thank you all. That takes us to the last part of our agenda. Any additional information or comments? And I'm going to go to each board member to make brief comments. Ms. Evans, do you have anything?
No, I've done anything.
Whoops.
Dr.
Was that an
Brennan?
invitation?
Dr. Brennan?
Yes, just very briefly, I had the privilege last Thursday of joining Dr. Sinya and Dr. Coleman at City Council chambers to have a group interview with City Council, which we all hope went pretty well, but I thought Kim and James did a great job. It was interesting. They had two main questions for us. One was collective bargaining, which by the recent General Assembly legislation can be put in place for city employees, county employees, and school employees starting in May of next year. So they thought that may be a topic we want to discuss in the future, as I'm sure we will. And the other question they had was about exit interviews, which I thought was very interesting. And two of the people on City Council who have been on school board said in the past, when employees left, there was a formal exit interview process. And I think we've talked about that. And I won't bring it up, but I thought maybe Ms. Sellers at some point at a future meeting could just bring us up to date on what is the process for personnel as far as the exit interviews go. And then lastly, if I'm not reappointed and my Zoom window is blank next in July 7th, I hope you all have a nice summer.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan.
Thank you.
Carter?
I just want to just make sure that if everyone that's listening to please go and fill out that survey, because we need your input as to your concerns and questions, and you never know, you may have a wonderful idea that we can use. And just want to thank everyone for all their hard work. You would think that since the school, no students are there, you'll have an easier time, but I guess you all are busier than ever. Just hang in there and we'll get through this too.
Thank you.
That's all.
Dr. Nilles?
No, I want to thank administration on all the employees in the division. I mean, it's and I said this before, and we've all said it. We're in unique times. Every day is different. It's a new challenge. There is no experience to draw on. You really got to make it up as you go. And the staff have really stepped up. I'm grateful to be associated with this public school division. So thank you all very much.
Dr. Sinai?
Yes, I too want to thank Dr. Edwards and everybody throughout the division for the hard work I know you're doing to get us prepared for fall. You know, I work at a college and we're going to have in-person classes, and I just know how much work has gone into that. And we have an enrollment of under 400 people. So I can't imagine what it's like for over 8,000. So kudos to you. Also kudos for the endless process of refining the budget and finding ways to cut. You know, I thought we were really impressive when we were doing level funding for the 4th year in a row. Little did I know that everything would be disrupted. And finally, I too had a really good experience with our group interview with City Council. And at the end of it, I told them how collaborative it felt and very useful to have that dialogue, and that I really wish we could do that more often, have those kinds of sessions. So I hope that'll come true. I think it'll hopefully just make us aware that we really do want the same things. We just think about them in different ways. So I'll end with that.
Well said, Kim. Mr. Harvey?
Yeah, I too want to just reinforce what all the board members have said, that we have such an incredible administration, such an incredible staff throughout LCS. And it's one of those things that really makes you proud to be a part of it and honored to get to work with some of these great people. With that being said, I want to encourage our community and our businesses to look for ways that you can say thank you to our staff, to our administration teams. These people are working hard for us as the community, and it says a lot when the community responds back with a thank you, because I know all of our staff work really hard and would be appreciative of just receiving a that a boy and thank you for all that you are doing. So I encourage our business community and our citizens in the Lynchburg city to just say a thank you to our teachers, to our staff, to everyone who is preparing for us to reopen. All the maintenance staff who are working hard to not only clean our schools, but to make repairs while we have this opportunity. All the people that are just doing so much that we just take for granted. So again, if you have that opportunity, pass along a thank you to them.
Well said. Dr. Gupta?
I wanted to congratulate Dr. Coleman's mother, who has been a dedicated educator all her life, for her happy birthday today. So
thank you.
Maybe you can put the audio clip to her so she can hear happy birthday. He's in Richmond sitting there enjoying party. Secondly, I wanted to make sure teachers know that this step increase is a small hiccup. In October, we are going to visit again, and it will be unfair in my mind for them to leave out those who are on an alternate year increase. And I know Dr. Edwards and everybody else deserve kudos, but there are a lot of nutrition workers, bus drivers who are working on a daily basis, who deserve our applause, who deserve our gratitude, and who deserve our thank you. So my thank you is to them, and the person behind me is thank you, Susan.
Oh,
Susan Morrison. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well said. Dr. Coleman?
Yes, Madam Chair. Let me begin by saying how proud I am of our entire board, but to Bob Brennan, Michael Nillis, Susan Morrison, and anyone else on our Legislative Advocacy and Community Relations Committee. I have in front of me the final proposed revisions to Virginia School Boards Association. 5 school divisions participated in this process this year with 7 proposals. Of course, Fairfax County with 3 proposals with all of their hired staff, and Virginia Beach City with the largest municipality in the Commonwealth. But then we find Lynchburg City with 1 proposal, along with Prince William and Culpeper County. And I just want to let each of you know how proud we are of the leadership of the chair of our committee and each of the committee members, because this is huge. And many people are talking about there's a footprint in Lynchburg being established. And Madam Chair, beyond that, if I would, I want to commend you on your comment in our last board member meeting concerning all of the cultural dynamics that we're having, the tension. Your comment was outstanding. And I would like to know and have direction from you of how you would want the board. I know that Dr. Edwards has weighed in, superintendents from across the Commonwealth has weighed in. There's been a statement from the Virginia School Board Association and the Virginia High School League, Superintendent Lane, and even our Lynchburg Student Rise organization here locally, made up of every race, all genders, all coming together to say we want to have a healthy world for everybody. If in fact this board wanted to do a resolution that would send a clear statement to our community about the fact that we are one family, one people working together and care about all of the participants.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. I think you'll see something on the July agenda with a resolution proclamation from the board.
Yes, ma'am.
That's coming up. I'd like to thank this entire board. It's energizing to work with such a dedicated group of people. rode behind two lunch buses last week, and it just made me smile to see the happy faces of the children and the workers and the parents. It just gives you a real lift. I do want to send out a very special congratulations to Miss Ann Berry, who is retiring. She's had 31 years with Lynchburg City School. Her last job was a science instructional specialist. She developed hands-on science kits for elementary students, integrating SOLs in our science curriculum. She is considered a true legend in Lynchburg City School community and contributed significantly to the improved science elementary SOL scores. So we are going to miss Ann. I also want to send out one more thanks to Karen Nelson, who has been a leader in this school division for decades. And she has worked so hard for the Paramount community and has made significant changes. We will miss her, but I want her to know that retirement is great and she's earned it. Dr. Edwards, I want to thank you. I can't find the words. I'm getting very choked up right now because we're doing great things. Thank you. Our next school board meeting on July 7th will be at 5 p.m. in the boardroom. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. With that, this meeting is closed.
Thank you.